Labour has been in power for just 6 months, but it's already finding itself under immense scrutiny from the British public. In its short tenure, the party has faced numerous challenges, but none as serious as the economic crisis now threatening to plunge the United Kingdom into a full-blown recession. New data reveals alarming signs that Labour's economic policies may be failing, and the impact is beginning to hit businesses, workers, and families across the country. A recent report from the Office for National Statistics shows that Britain's GDP fell by 0.1% in October. This marks the second consecutive monthly decline after a similar drop of 0.1% in September. This downward trend follows modest growth of 0.2% in August 2024, which now seems like a distant memory. Economists have already warned that the situation could worsen, as Labour's controversial budget continues to erode business confidence and stifle economic recovery. What's particularly alarming is the context of this decline. The United Kingdom hasn't seen 2 successive months of negative growth since the early days of the pandemic in April 2020. Back then, the world faced an unprecedented health crisis, and economic disruptions were largely unavoidable. However, this time, critics argue that the economic turmoil is entirely self-inflicted. In just 5 months, Labour has taken what was a recovering economy and sent it hurtling toward recession. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch didn't hold back in her critique of Labour's handling of the economy. She pointed out the growing fears within the business community, saying, "The businesses I speak to are afraid for their future. Some have stopped hiring, others are letting people go, and some will go bust." Labour inherited the fastest growth in the G7, but Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have crashed the economy. Government is about making choices, and this Labour government has chosen to hike taxes on businesses, and we will all pay the price. Badenoch's concerns echo the sentiments of many small business owners and corporate leaders who feel abandoned by Labour's economic policies. Higher taxes, increased regulatory burdens, and a lack of support for struggling industries are creating an environment where growth is stalling, and layoffs are becoming inevitable. In response, Labour's Chancellor Rachel Reeves attempted to defend the government's record. She acknowledged that the GDP numbers were disappointing but maintained that turning around an economy struggling from more than a decade of poor economic growth and stagnant living standards couldn't be achieved in a matter of months. Reeves insisted that the government is working tirelessly to improve economic growth and raise living standards, but critics remain skeptical of these assurances. What makes this situation even more frustrating for many is the stark contrast between Labour's campaign promises and its actions in government. During the general election, Labour promised a bold vision of economic renewal, touting policies that would bring prosperity to all corners of the UK. However, these promises now ring hollow for many as the reality of higher taxes, slower growth, and rising unemployment sets in. The pain is being felt across the country. Businesses are struggling to stay afloat. Workers are losing jobs, and families are dealing with the burden of rising costs and stagnant wages. Economists predict that the UK could face a prolonged period of economic stagnation if Labour doesn't take immediate action to change course. Critics argue that the government must prioritise measures that stimulate growth, support businesses, and rebuild consumer confidence. Meanwhile, the British public is left wondering, how did we get here so quickly? Labour inherited an economy that, while not perfect, was showing signs of recovery. The UK had the fastest growing economy in the G7 when Labour came to power. Now, just months later, that progress has been reversed, and the country faces an uncertain future. This raises an important question. Is Labour capable of steering the country out of this crisis? The government's critics argue that its current trajectory is unsustainable and that bold leadership is needed to prevent further damage. Others believe Labour deserves more time to deliver on its promises and that the challenges it faces are the result of years of mismanagement by previous administrations. One thing is clear. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Labour fails to address the economic downturn, the consequences could be devastating for the country. From higher unemployment to reduced public services, the cost of a prolonged recession would be felt by everyone. So, what do you think? Is Labour to blame for Britain's economic woes, or is this simply the result of external factors and long-term challenges? Are Labour's policies reckless and poorly thought out, or is the government doing its best in an incredibly tough situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know whether you think Labour is steering the UK in the right direction or toward disaster.